meeting. This is the Development Control meeting. I'll explain the procedure for hearing the applications when we get to them. Firstly, we are not expecting a fire alarm. If you hear something that sounds remotely like one, that means there is, we think, a fire. And therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, if you please leave the building straight away through the, for the members of the public, through that exit behind you. And if you've been signed in and we know that you're here, please don't rush away because we need to count heads and make sure everyone's left the building. Hasn't happened yet, and I live in sincere hope this is not going to happen this evening. But please don't run away because we do need to make sure, if it does happen, that we know everyone's safely out. The meeting is being webcast, and that means that the members, when they speak, and officers will appear on the webcast. The speakers who come to speak to us about the applications will appear, and if you sit in the front row of the stalls, you may well be webcast because you're sitting immediately behind where the camera points to when visiting speakers speak. I have apologies for absence only from Councillor Round, with I think no substitute, as far as I'm aware. Any other? Sorry, Bound. Who am I talking about? Bound. Right, I'll be Bound. Right, so yes, but you're not substituting for him because you're a member of the committee. Right. Fine. Let's settle that. Only we will understand what was going on there. I have no declarations of interest. I have no urgent items or announcements.
It's Councillor Leaks, but anyway, I declare an interest on item 5, as I've enjoyed many a hospitality in a nearby residence. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? We don't need the culinary compliments, thank you. Any other? No more declarations of interest. I have no urgent items or announcements. I ask members to comment on if they have any comments or queries or changes to the minutes of the previous meeting. No, is it your will that I sign those as correct record of proceedings? We'll do it afterwards to save time, Mike. Don't let me forget. I have no referrals from other committees or from the council or from the cabinet. So we move on to the applications for planning permissions, and we start on what in the numbered pages is page 1 of 69 with Sheridan Crescent, Borghurst. I have a note that we are expecting Mrs. Waterfield, Mrs. Turner and Mr. Smith to be here, but I'm told that only Mrs. Waterfield will speak. Is that right? Are you here, Mrs. Waterfield? If you'd like to come forward and sit at the table, please. Thank you. And you just sit there for a moment. And the procedure is that for each of the applications, the officers will present the report and any supplementary update. If you haven't already seen it, those of you who are here for listening to the applications, there is a small paper which only appears today because it reports on matters that have arisen since the main report, and there are copies on the side table there. And in each case, we'll ask the officers to introduce the application, and then I will ask public speakers to speak to us, and then we will carry on with the meeting with members, questions to officers and members' comments. So if you just wait for a moment, we'll ask the officers to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is a retrospective application for the change of use dwelling C3 to a mixed-use dwelling and bed and breakfast and the retention of an attached timber store. Members had the opportunity to view the site, and the notes from the viewing panel are contained within the update paper. In addition, the consultation from Hampshire County Council Emergency Planning Officer has now been received and raised no objection. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions listed within the main agenda paper.
Mrs. Waterfield, if you'd like to press the wider of the black buttons, and you have 4 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this subject. My name is Penny Waterfield. My property lies to the immediate left of the application site. I'm one of 8 objectors to the application and have been nominated by them to speak on their behalf. Many are here this evening, and it should be noted that this application has resulted in a large number of objections, which I think speaks for itself. The applications are retrospective and thus are an indication of the lack of consideration which the applicants hold both for the law and their immediate neighbours. The officer's reasons for recommending approval are: number 1, development is of appropriate design and relates to surrounding development in a sympathetic manner. You've received various objections by residents to the wooden structure which is affixed to the side of the property, and it's transparently clear that the structure is neither of appropriate design nor sympathetic in nature to the property or its surroundings. Number 2, development does not result in undue loss of privacy or cause undue overlooking, overshadowing, overbearing, or noise and disturbance impacts to neighbouring properties. These comments are made by officers who cannot have and have not experienced the noise and disturbance resulting from the increase in visitors to the property. The constant movement and noise resulting from the parking and shuffling of cars, the meeting and greeting, the use of outdoor catering amenities, and the lack of respect for the need of noise restraint when living in close proximity to others all smacks of a total disregard for the community in which the applicants live. Number 3, the development would not cause an adverse effect on highway safety, and adequate parking would be provided to serve the proposed development. Technically, the revised plans show sufficient spaces for off-street parking. However, the access to the property is still only wide enough for one car to enter or egress at any one time. The officer's report indicates that cars will be encouraged to reverse and turn into the communal area fronting the 3 properties, re-entering Sheridan Crescent in forward gear. However, land registry plans show that sections of this communal area are each owned by the individual property owners, and such use could therefore not be guaranteed without the written permission of the other landowners. Cars, therefore, would still need to reverse directly onto the public highway, with the attendant problems of highway safety. Parking on street remains an issue because, in a small area with 4 parking spaces and only one single exit, there will inevitably be a certain amount of juggling needed to allow the easy exit of one particular vehicle. In the past, the applicants have solved this by parking off-site, haphazardly and illegally with wheels on the pavement, along stretches of Sheridan Crescent, causing traffic chaos on occasion. Given their past history, we see no reason why this should change. One of our biggest concerns, however, is that of enforcement. Should the application be granted, and given the applicant's previous total disregard for legal requirements, we feel that a gradual usage of other rooms in the property for B&B purposes is inevitable, and this could not easily be monitored. Increased usage would, in turn, naturally promote additional noise and disturbance.
You have just under a minute.
Another concern is that of precedent in what was previously a quiet residential area, where consideration for our neighbours is paramount and where we would all like to live peaceably with one another. We urge you to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just press your big and just stay there for a moment, do members have any questions for Mrs. Waterfield? Yes, Councillor Leeks.
Can I just confirm on that picture that the back garden actually backs onto yours? I think you're 51, isn't it? 51. And the other thing is, are you aware, does the public highway stop? Are those 3 houses basically on their own private highway? Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Mrs. Waterfield, you said that currently there is sometimes traffic chaos. Could you just explain what you mean by traffic chaos, please?
Because the driveway runs vertically like this, if they have more than 2 cars on the driveway, there isn't room and space for the cars to manoeuvre. Therefore, they have been in the habit of parking their cars, their visitors' cars, anybody coming to the property, on the highway which runs to the right of the property, which you can just see in the corner of that picture. It's a very narrow road. It's also got a slight bend in it and also humps where the tree roots have caused unbalance. To try and get cars past there, you've got cars coming in either direction. You've got cars coming from the little closes who have nowhere to turn when there are cars fronting them as they come out. It has been fairly dramatic down there on occasion.
Could I just ask, I mean, this is a 4-bedroom, I think, fairly large residential dwelling. I mean, presumably it could occupy 4 or 5 adults anyway, all with cars. Is that the case? I mean, do the residents who live around accept the premise that you could have as many vehicles for a normal domestic use? Would that be right?
With all due respect, yes, it is a 4-bedroomed house. Yes, they could have had a large family or with cars. That's perfectly viable. However, on our estate and in previous past experience, my own family being amongst them, we have tried to manage that. So, I'm not explaining myself terribly well. If you have visitors to a property, you cannot expect them to have the same ownership of a property if they are B&B guests as residents would who have to live with their neighbours. It's a very different culture.
Thank you very much. If you'd like now to withdraw, I have Miss Merrick to speak for the application. Thank you. And if you press the big white black button, that's it, and you have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Anne Merrick. I currently reside at 55 Sheridan Crescent and have done so since May 2002, I think, which makes it 11 years. During that time, I've lived in a way that hasn't changed, and up until that point today, I've received no complaints from neighbours about my behaviour at that property before or since my application for bed and breakfast. A bit of background which might be helpful is that I have in fact had experience of running a bed and breakfast similar operation previously in Pyatt's Copse, which is a very highly sought after executive residence in Chinham. I applied to the council at that point in Basingstoke, to yourselves, for permission, and was told that it wasn't required because having a couple of spare rooms in a property which has planning permission as a 5-bedroom dwelling is not required. At the point where I decided to start doing B&B in my current residence, I was in a position where I'd been made redundant, and I had a severe disability with an impairment to my hip. Rather than take advantage of government handouts, I decided to see if I could do something myself to sustain my economic situation. I approached the council by a visit to the council offices and sought some consultation with the duty planning officer, who searched through the planning records for a precedent. I explained that I'd done it before in Pyatt's Copse. He pointed me to the government website, which in fact I placed the link to that on my submission, which states that it suggests that planning would not be necessary in a 5-bedroom house where 2 bedrooms are being used as a bed and breakfast small business. So on that basis, I decided that I was okay to carry on and start the business. There's never been any intention to antagonise or disrupt our local neighbourhood. In fact, I have very good relationships with my immediate neighbours, and they knew right from the start in terms of Mr. and Mrs. Lysett and Mr. and Mrs. Elliott, who we share the drive with, and who would be absolutely affected if there was any behaviour or parking problems that would affect them more than anybody else. On that basis, I decided to carry on. And I'd been conducting that business for some time when one of my neighbours,
just under a minute.
Thank you, decided to visit me to ask how I was. In that conversation, I actually told Mr. Turner that I was running a B&B. He confessed at that point that he had no idea that I was operating such a business in the house. Coincidentally, a few weeks later, we received a visit from the planning officer. Up until that point, I have to say, I don't think any of my neighbours knew, because it's a low-key operation that I don't wish to be advertising locally. I've raised no boards to advertise the fact. We don't have any passing traffic.
You will need to finish quite soon.
People who stay with me in the last year, over 70% of them have no vehicles. They stay with me because they can walk to Cleaver Park and to AWE because they're visiting from outside the area.
Could you just finish now?
Parking problems are not an issue. Thank you.
If you just press your big black button again and stay there a moment. Do members have any? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mrs. Merrick. We heard that some vehicles were parked sort of inappropriately on the roads, and you've just said most of, or 70% or so of your clients don't. Have you any idea whose vehicles they were? Were they associated with your property?
My partner's taken several photographs of vehicles parked inappropriately. This evening I returned home to find a car completely on the pavement outside Mrs. Levitt's house and a van parked in an inappropriate manner as well. So, you know, it's a residential area. People have visitors, they have work people. You don't always have the time and energy to make sure that people are parking appropriately. I've no idea who some of these people are. Where we've had people parking, we do state categorically that they should not park illegally, they should not block anybody's driveway, and they should not have any wheels on the pavement. A local neighbour had to report it to the police because somebody was parking with two wheels on the pavement. They couldn't get a pushchair past. Nothing to do with the B&B, it was at the entrance of Sheridan Crescent. So we're very supportive of there being no traffic problems.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Ms. Merrick. We read in our papers that the local planning authority originally became aware of you operating the bed and breakfast and as a result of an enforcement complaint received in August 2011, and that a planning application was submitted on the 16th of October 2012. Could you remember at what point you were advised that you would need to submit that planning application, please?
I had a visit out of the blue from the enforcement officer who arrived at the property unannounced. I happened to be cleaning my carpets at the time, so the front door was open. She had a look round and said there had been a complaint by a neighbour. She advised me that the property had loads of parking, there would be no problem, and that it was most appropriate for that kind of operation, that she couldn't foresee any problems. She then left the property and I heard nothing further for at least 6 months until 2012 when we received a phone call to call her. We were away at the time. When I did get in touch, we were given something like 7 days to submit a planning application, which in my opinion was totally unreasonable. I had no time to prepare the documentation. We employed a professional architect to submit plans who unfortunately didn't do a very good job, and resulted in me withdrawing that application so that I could submit it properly as I have done this time.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check the number of bedrooms. When you first spoke, you mentioned there were 5 bedrooms. And that you'd been told that that was quite okay for you to use 2 for a B&B. But now I believe there's only 4. Have you changed something?
There we go. When I bought the property, and I think the planning permission granted for the building of it was based on a 5-bedroom house, we've taken down the smallest bedroom, which is actually at the top of the stairs, to make an open plan area because the landing was very dark and it was a silly little bedroom. When I bought the property, already somebody had combined the 2 bedrooms you can see on the left hand side of the plan to make a master suite and a dressing room. So in theory, a 5-bedroom house. In practice, we have three rooms with beds in. If that makes sense.
Councillor Miller? Anything else? Thank you very much. If you'd like to withdraw, Ward Councillor.
Right, I'm speaking obviously for Councillor Mike Bound, who's on holiday, so I'll start as he's written it. First of all, I'm sorry that I can't be present to speak tonight, but I hope that you will listen to my thoughts on this proposal. This bed and breakfast application has aroused quite a lot of local opposition for a number of reasons, and will ask the committee to consider the main reasons for objection when making their decision. Parking is one, and the other is noise associated with people using the B&B facility. The report suggests that noise generated by guests at the B&B while in the garden of the property would, or could, be no more than that would be generated by a family living in the property. And I generally, you know what I'm saying, I think, agree with this argument, okay? I would say, however, that the family in the property might have more regard for those around and about with whom they might socialise than paying guests would, many of whom would only be a resident for one night. In regard to the traffic and parking, anecdotally, there have already been problems associated with running the bed and breakfast business. As those who went on the site would have observed, the property from which the business is being run already would have noticed that it's tucked away in a corner of a small development of 3 dwellings that has 1 entrance. Right. Under this proposal, the garage is going to be left as a garage, but many garages on this estate are not actually used as garages, because many of them are rather narrow for ease of getting in and out of the vehicle when it's parked inside. So, when there are parked in front of the garage, thus taking out the garage as a parking space. Residents elsewhere in the immediate locality have told me that vehicles have been used as a bed and breakfast facility to date, often park out in the Sheridan Crescent proper, sometimes in front of houses or entrance of houses, causing great convenience. Whilst I realise that parking on the highway is not an offence unless there are parking restrictions in place, I do fear that this proposal will give legality to the bed and breakfast establishment in this residential area, which will mean that local residents will often be faced with this convenience. Notwithstanding the Highways Officer lack of objections in the borough's assessment that the parking as proposed will be sufficient to meet the needs of the business and the permanent residents. Thank you for listening. I hope that's what it says here. Sorry about all that. Sounds a bit
Thank you.
jumbled.
Could you just press your button again?
Oh yes, sorry.
Any questions to the officers? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Chair. Not quite sure where this one's going to go. Land or respond. This house was built, we understand, as a 5-bedroom house. What are the parking requirements for this 5-bedroom house? And I've got a couple more related to the same issue.
Under the current adopted residential standards, a 4-bedroom plus house in this location would be 3 spaces.
And does the property have 3 spaces?
It benefits from quite a large garage, so that would count for 1 space, and we've also got the large driveway, so I think you could commonly accommodate 3 cars, yes.
Does the fact that is now the application is asking for this to be run as a bed and breakfast, now it's a bit confusing in the paperwork, because we've got comments in the update paper as opposed to the main report that how many rooms would be made available. We've got 3 advertised, but only 2 would be used. It's a little confusing, I think, for the committee to try and equate these numbers of rooms that are available. You either advertise for a certain number of rooms available for bed and breakfast, or, you can adapt it, but you don't have a double standard coming in here. We either have 3 rooms that are being applied for a bed and breakfast, or 2. My point is, does that drive any change in the parking requirements for a bed and breakfast? I got a feeling it must do.
In terms of the number of rooms, I think the applicant spoke on site that whilst they do advertise for 3, only 2 would be used as the B&B, and that is obviously suggested as a condition as well. They advertise the 3, including the double room, for example, if they do have a couple, for example, that want to stay there, and then the applicants would move to a separate room. But obviously under the condition to ensure that only two bedrooms are used as that, and I think that is reasonable to impose that condition.
On that basis, you've got easily the potential to have 4 cars there. I don't know how many the residents have in the way of vehicles. You just identified the residents are living in the house, plus 3 bed and breakfast rooms occupied by potentially 3 different people. That's what I just heard.
And just confirm, the application is for two bedrooms to be used bed and breakfast, and the condition would restrict it to only 2 bedrooms being used for bed and breakfast. So the parking requirements overall would be met as set out in the report. I mean, Marcus may be able to comment further on the question as to whether there was an additional bedroom, as I understand it, that would mean an additional parking space would be required. But as it stands at the moment with this application, with the condition, it is 2 bedrooms being used for bed and breakfast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general question. We heard from the applicant that she'd read some advice and had sought advice about whether or not it was necessary to have permission for a bed and breakfast. Could you sort of just clarify where we are with that and what the view is, please?
And basically, it's a matter of fact and degree, so there's no right or wrong answer. I think the example that the applicant gave with regard to the last property that she used, she was using 2 bedrooms from a 5-bedroom property, meaning that the majority of the bedrooms were still in private residential use. Whereas with the case here, we've taken the view that the predominant use would be as a bed and breakfast, with only 1 bedroom being used for the single family dwelling house and the remaining 2, the other 2 as the bed and breakfast. So it's a grey area. It is a matter of fact and degree, and judgment has to be made. But in this case, we felt that permission would be required because the greater number of bedrooms would be for the B&B use.
Anything else? Oh, sorry, David. Ah, right, okay. Discussion? Councillor Tucker?
I'd like to just refer to Sheridan Crescent, whether or not the people who have been causing problems with parking there are connected to the B&B. There's no way I can tell that. But what I do know, and I have represented that area as a county councillor for 8 years, that Sheridan Crescent is a very strange place. If you just want to park, it's a lovely place, should I say, but a strange place if you want to park your car and deliver literature, because you have to park your car and make sure that you're not going to be in the way of somebody on the other side coming out, somebody coming in and visually. It is I don't know why I've never had this particular feeling on any other road at all, but this one is not easy to park, and I'm not at all surprised that there has been problems.
Any other speakers?
In the absence of anybody else speaking, I think this is one of those typical cases which has just gained momentum as it goes along, and I think we've got to kind of rein it back and look at the actual facts as we see them now. And it seems, first of all, that we know that the need for planning permission in the first place is very marginal. And secondly, I think it's clear, and I've read all of the objections. The only one that I think could be deemed relevant in terms of planning is the parking. And I totally appreciate that there are difficulties in this road with parking, but if this particular application meets our own parking standards, I don't see that we can really do anything else but grant it permission. And difficult that may be for everybody, I really don't see that under our own planning policies we can do anything but grant it permission, because we have no reason to turn it down. And I will, as I'm the only person speaking, therefore propose that we grant approval.
Councillor Sherlock. Yes, it's very interesting that this problem of parking and neighbours, and there's always two sides to the story. It did sound to me, it's quite a plausible idea that when I was doing B&B, my wife mainly, I was the breakfast cook. Most of the people who stayed with us were long term, and they came for 4 nights a week. They weren't in and out all the time, and they behaved themselves impeccably. We wouldn't have had them if they didn't. We'd have thrown them out. So I think the story about how the thing works from the applicant's point of view is quite plausible. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour of approval? That's carried. Officers, please confirm.
Thank you, Chair. The application has been approved subject to the conditions listed at the end of the report.
Not particularly, but if you want to vote against, by all means do. All right, that's okay. Thank you. To number 2, Mayfield Farm Binley, and I have Mr. Soames, the applicant, and Mr. Ellis, the agent, if you'd like to come forward and sit together, please. And if you'd like to just wait while officers present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the demolition of the existing dwelling and outbuildings at the site and the erection of a detached 6-bedroom dwelling with a basement, detached garage and workshop with ancillary living accommodation over, together with the construction of a swimming pool and landscaping works. Members have had the benefit of visiting the site, noting the setting within the area of outstanding natural beauty. Draw members' attention to the update sheet, where we have now received comments from the biodiversity officer, raising no objection, subject to a condition to ensure bat protection. Replacement dwellings in the countryside are generally acceptable in principle, provided they do not significantly change the siting, scale, setting and character compared to the existing, unless exceptionally justified. In this case, officers consider the proposal would not meet these objectives, and as such the proposal is recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in the main report.
Thank you, gentlemen. You have 4 minutes.
Good evening, members. My name is Sandy Soames, and I'm the applicant. This is intended as a home for me and my family. We already live in the area, but in a rented house. As this is a matter of planning policies, I'm asking my advisor, Ian, to speak on my behalf, but of course I'll be very happy to answer any questions.
The officer recommendation on page 13 of 69 says that this is an unacceptable scale and unsustainable form of development which would be visually harmful to the character and appearance of the countryside. That is the principal reason for refusal and is clearly a matter of subjective opinion. The revised proposal has been very carefully considered in full recognition of the planning and landscape issues. At its heart is the replacement of 2 lawful dwellings by 1 main house plus an ancillary staff unit. In the process, 18 buildings spread across the site and hillside, including the 2 existing dwellings, would be demolished. These total 940 square metres. The new buildings have a floor area of 905 square metres. The scale of the development is less than exists and focused on 2 new buildings in an unobtrusive location. It is a positive benefit in landscape terms, especially when coupled with a high specification ecological landscape scheme for the whole of the site. The new residential curtilage is smaller than historically existed, but is 22% larger than currently exists. But it is tucked into the landscape and enclosed by existing trees on both the road frontage and those set into the site, and by new additional planting. The curtilage would have no adverse visual impact on the wider landscape. This is a return to the original development before the annex was granted a certificate of lawfulness as an independent dwelling. That dwelling is in a poor condition, extremely small, and in a location where depletion of housing stock is of little consequence, especially as the case officer would require a legal agreement to prevent the staff flat being occupied as an independent dwelling anyway. The design of the new building is of a high quality using local materials. It is immeasurably superior to the present utilitarian buildings and the house that cover the hillside. The house has been designed with a Georgian theme with an older style brick and flint element that is also the design theme for the garage and staff flat. The design, proportions and materials are consistent with Hampshire farmhouses of the late Georgian and early Victorian period. There are many examples of such houses in the locality, and recent permissions at Elm Farm, Slade Bottom Farm and Great Eastwoods in Binley have continued that theme. The dwelling would be set into the hillside and sit between the two existing houses close to the existing trees. Obviously those two houses have gone. In effect, it is one whole floor level below the level of the existing second dwelling unit. The garage and staff flat is on the site of an existing building
Just under a minute.
where the ground level will be lowered by 2 metres. There are no nearby footpaths and only the fleetest glimpse would be possible from the public highway. There are substantial planning benefits arising from the proposal, namely the removal of 17 ugly buildings that detract from the character and appearance of the AONB, the unobtrusive siting set into the site, utilising existing and augmented landscape cover, comprehensive management of the whole site in an ecological manner, an architect-designed development of character that will contribute to the rich architectural heritage of the borough, and a residential curtilage that is smaller than the original cottage. For these reasons, the applicant believes the proposal does not have the undesirable impact the officers allege, and I would urge you to reject their recommendation and grant planning permission.
Master stroke of timing. Thank you. Questions to the applicant and his agent, members? No? Thank you both very much. If you'd just like to withdraw. Questions to officers? No? I'm the ward member. I apologise to members who attended the site visit on Friday that no ward member was there to welcome you. I shall speak to the other ward member who, as soon as I get the opportunity, he hasn't told me he failed to turn up. I do apologise for that. As you'll see, I asked for this to come to committee because I took the view, and I hadn't at that stage seen the officer's report, but I took the view that this was a significant improvement of the site. I have since had an opportunity to talk to one or two other people in the immediate neighbourhood, and particularly the landowner whose land is immediately opposite. Looking of as the front of the building, looking down the slope and across the road, who owns the woodland and fields on the other side, who said that if he stood at the front of his field, which he doesn't do, his woodland, which he doesn't do often, he'd think it would be an improvement rather than any disaster. And I'm moved by the fact that the AONB officer, who looks at all major scale developments in the AONB very carefully, has not commented on this. So it seems to me a matter of subjective judgment. I look forward to hearing what members who did the site visit have to say, but I can't find it in me to say that this is somehow worsening the situation of the immediate site or indeed the AONB compared with what we're seeing today. Thank you. Councillor Miller.
You ready for discussion, debate, Chair? I think this is another example of how important a site visit is. If I read this report and I looked at the drawings, there is absolutely no way that you could picture in your mind what this site looks like. And when we drove up, we were greeted with very dilapidated corrugated iron and rotten wood timber buildings, and there's only one thing you can do with them, and that's take a bulldozer to it. You start to correlate what you see in the report to the site, and for the convenience of the viewing panel, the applicant and/or with the help of his agent had actually marked out the footprint of the building. And it's also very important on the site that you can see how the slope of the land lends to what has been modified in the design, is that they intend to cut back into it. You can see it on this particular picture here, that's temporary accommodation they've got there is going to go, and they sit the planned house back into the slope, so effectively lowering the profile of the building. That wasn't the original plan, I understood, having talked to the applicant, but it's subsequently been incorporated into the design. Very briefly, I think this is going to bring a complete improvement to the local landscape. It's going to get rid of, well, I don't know what the word is. The buildings are trashed. There's no other way for it. It's more like a rubbish dump than anything else. The one building they're retaining is the brick building to accommodate the bat population, which would actually fit in because it's an old building, but it actually fits into the site. So I'm afraid I'll go along with the AONB officer. It doesn't deteriorate the outlook of the site itself or the AONB, and I would move for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Tucker?
I could very easily just say ditto because I feel very much as Councillor Miller has said. And
No member should feel the need to say a lot more if
no,
they agree with everybody.
I just wanted to say that the only person or being that might be affected was the lovely bull on the other side of the...
Councillor Potter?
Sorry, Chair, taking note of your encouragement to be brief. I mean, obviously, accepting the premise that all of the buildings that you describe as decrepit could be cleared at any time, and that would be an improvement in itself. I said, and I know we've said it's subjective, but I think collectively, I think we felt that what we were being shown certainly wouldn't be described as being visually harmful to the character and appearance of that area. In fact, just the opposite, really. I mean, hiding my envy, I think it's going to be a beautiful... well, as best I can, sorry, but I think it's going to be a beautiful house, and I think it will enhance the area. So I'm sorry it disagrees with the recommendation of the officer. I genuinely am, really, but I feel it's going to be an improvement rather than anything else, and I'd certainly support the approval.
Not sure whether anybody seconded it. Did you second it? Thank you. Any other speakers? It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour of approval? Looks like everybody. That's approved.
The application's been approved. I need some reasons from you, and then I have some potential conditions to suggest that you might want to consider as well.
Reasons?
Chair, I think I tried to explain it. I never can go through the wording. Wherever it says detrimental, it's not detrimental. It would not be visually harmful to the character and appearance of the area. Now, I'm not going to argue with the MPPF and the references, because I think I'm not quite sure the wording of the policy, the MPPF references in here, but I think the general tone is that it does comply with an improvement to the countryside. How that reflects in those MPPF policies, I'm not quite sure, or the paragraphs. I'm not sure they're policies, but the paragraphs. It is a sustainable form of development. It's not an unacceptable scale, so we counter the reasons in here. I know we've said this many times before in other applications, but that's my simplest way of doing this, unless the officers would suggest a better form of wording.
So I think listening to the debate, there was a lot of weight put on the improvements to the appearance of the site overall and the significant gains, which I think are the key point in the planning policy, which says that effectively increase in size of dwelling, change to the siting of dwelling, or increase in curtilage shouldn't be allowed unless there are exceptional reasons to do that if there are significant environmental improvements. So I guess the committee is saying there's significant environmental improvements, which supports the principle.
Thank you very much.
Yes, suggested conditions, so the usual time for implementation, plans, materials. Also the accommodation, ancillary accommodation above the garage, to be used solely in connection with the existing dwelling so that no separate dwelling can be created. The bat protection conditions suggested by the biodiversity officer. A number of highway ones in relation to providing appropriate levels of parking and turning and setback of gates, and the construction of the means of access, those details to be submitted for approval. A landscaping condition, including boundary treatments given the special landscape setting of the area. The I think there's some mature trees on the site, so a tree protection plan to be submitted for approval. And the Environmental Health Officer was also suggesting in their response the desktop contaminated land investigation and verification, given its use as a farm. And the removal of permitted development rights in relation to large outbuildings, given the size of the curtilage that's going to be associated with a new dwelling.
The tree officer hasn't presumably visited the site if there's no comment from the tree officer. No.
On the site visit, I specifically asked the question, what would happen to the trees? Not one tree is going to be affected. That's what we were told on the site visit.
Yeah, the condition I'm suggesting is just the tree protection whilst development is being carried out.
Members happy with all that? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Move on to number 3, Plantation Farm Cottages, Wolverton. I have only the applicant and the applicant's agent, Mr. Bandy and Ms. Glaspool, I think, speaking. If you'd like to come forward. If you just sit there for a moment, we'll get the officers to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the demolition and replacement of 6 dwelling units and the erection of a 4-bed detached dwelling and associated garage, the erection of a pair of 2-bed semi-detached cottages and a terrace of 2 1-bed and 1 2-bed cottages. Members again have had the benefit of visiting the site, noting its location within the area of outstanding natural beauty. Draw your attention to the update paper. Further consultation received from the biodiversity officer, again recommending no objections subject to a good condition. An amended site layout plan has also been submitted in order to address the highway objections to the initial proposal. The highway officer is now satisfied with this and has withdrawn their objection. The recommendation is therefore for refusal, but only on the basis of the first refusal reason, the second relating to highway matters now being withdrawn.
Okay, you have 4 minutes.
Good evening, members of the committee. I am Richard Bandy and my wife and I are the applicants. Plantation Farm has been in the family for 60 years and it comprises of 430 acres of land, a range of agricultural, equestrian and residential buildings. We are committed to enhancing the farm so that our family can remain here for years to come. Our past and future lie within agriculture and the equine world, and we have no intentions of selling the farm or any of the properties. The building which we wish to replace is an unsightly large block of flats which currently houses 6 units. The property is a white rendered building with a steep pitched concrete tiled roof and is in a dilapidated state and in need of extension renovation. We are proposing that this unsightly building is demolished and replaced with 6 dwellings. 1 4-bedroom house for ourselves and 5 small 1 and 2 bedroom cottages which will provide much needed rented accommodation in the countryside. These properties will be built in red brick with clay tiled roofs to blend in with existing cottages on the farm and the surrounding area. A previous application for 3 dwellings was withdrawn following officer objection to the loss of dwellings in the countryside. Our new house is positioned a small distance away from the existing block of flats, however it remains within the curtilage of the flat's original garden. This is shown clearly in an aerial photograph dated 1969. It remained so until the 1980s when the last gardening tenant sadly passed away and the land was then grassed down. There is reference to the proposed development harming the character of the countryside in the AONB. We have commissioned a landscape consultant to provide an assessment of the landscape and visual impact of the proposed development, who we'll hear from very shortly. I would like to stress that the AONB officer has visited the site and the surrounding footpaths and bridleways and has raised no objections to this proposal. I would like to thank you for your time this evening. Our intention has only ever been to improve the farm, to enhance the local countryside and provide us with a family home to be proud of.
You have 2 more minutes.
Hello, my name is Claire Glass-Poole and I'm a landscape architect based in Salisbury. I hold qualifications in horticulture, landscape design and town planning, and I specialise in providing landscape and visual impact assessments. Although the landscape issues on this site have been considered by both Basingstoke and Dean and the AO&B officer, I have been asked to make an assessment of the current situation because these opinions do differ. I walked the surrounding footpaths and bridleways in August when the existing vegetation is in full leaf, providing the maximum screening, but I'm grateful the AO&B officer travelled the same routes in April, making his comments when the site would be most visible. Plantation Farm has a very specific landscape character, as the original farmhouse, other accommodation, farm structures and the home paddocks are surrounded by mature hedges, spinneys and shelter belts. From many points this planting coalesces to form a complete screen. This contrast between the enclosed, well-defined farmstead on high ground, surrounded by sweeping open downland, is of critical landscape importance and one that these proposals do not alter. There are no close neighbouring properties and very few clear or intrusive views to the existing buildings from public roads. Although there is a network of footpaths and bridleways around the farm, visibility for most is restricted by landform, existing hedges and mature vegetation. A bridleway running north-south crosses a localised valley 750 metres to the west of the existing farmstead, and there are some indirect glimpses towards the farmstead for only about 200 metres length of this path. Given the location of the proposed
I ask you to conclude, please.
Yes, given the location of the proposed dwelling within the farmstead, I conclude that the landscape and visual impact of the proposals is minimal. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just press thank you, if you stay there for a moment. Members, do you have any questions to the applicant? No, thank you very much. If you both withdraw. Ward member? Okay.
Good evening, and Councillor Ostleton's apologies for not being present this evening. In response to Appendix 13, D6 and E1 of the report, the design of the replacement dwelling has been carefully thought through to ensure that the character of the area is maintained. It will not be sited in a significantly different position than that of the original building. The replacement dwelling will not significantly change the siting, scale, bulk, setting and character of the existing dwelling already in place, and will protect the rural character of the area, providing a family home for a family who wish to continue to live in the area. A red brick house with no rendering as the present house, so it is less prominent than the present house. There are no alien features planned. The replacement house has in this application been moved 4 metres closer to the main farm complex and scaled down. The garage now has no accommodation above. The proposed cottage's terracing effect complies in that it should be set back and lower to create subservient appearance, which has been observed. The cottages are not cramped and are well designed to blend into the countryside. The Kingsclere Design Statement. The officer refers to the Kingsclere Village Design Statement, which states that any planning proposals for the area should respect the quality of the landscape, etc. In this case, only a small part of the roof of the replacement house will be seen by a resident in Kingsclere, and they have welcomed the build. I understand paragraph 115 of the MPPF and E6, but it bears no weight to what has been said by the Borough Landscape Officer. The AO&B officer has visited the site and has viewed the PROW network surrounding the site. He was not happy with the first planning submission, but on his second visit to review the new application, he agrees that it is difficult to get 6 units on the site without extending out in a westerly direction. From the wider landscape beyond, the views of the replacement house would be limited to mostly the roof area, and not at a similar way to the existing building to be demolished. The new application takes the building away from the most exposed western edge of the site. NPPF paragraph 14, Sustainable Development. Economic, social and environmental factors apply, as the farm will in time with accommodation have the wherefore to expand, and I believe this is the intentions of the applicants who would comply and make way for MPPF paragraph 20 building a strong competitive economy. It was the council in the first place who suggested we add further units in the reapplication as they were concerned at the loss of units. I am pleased that the impact on neighbouring amenities and amenity space are considered acceptable. As a ward member, I am mindful of the problem in the ward with regard to cars and parking, but there is a bus service within walking distance, and this problem of transport will not be rectified until we improve bus services to the rural areas. All relevant consultable persons to this application, including Hamilton Parish Council, are satisfied that through the proposed changes to this application, the character and qualities of the wider AONB landscape will be conserved. The replacement dwellings within the countryside will ensure that those living in the old house will have better accommodation, be able to stay and live in the countryside, and will provide much needed rented accommodation in the area for families to grow up in. They have no transport problems. I ask that the committee please approve the application under MPPF 11 paragraph 115. Great weight should be given to conserving landscape and scenic beauty. This AONB officer agrees has been adhered to and has no objections to this application. Thank you.
Questions to the officers? David.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's a genuine question. I want to understand rather better than I probably do at the moment, really, in regard to the commentary that we see, I think, repeated, saw it before, obviously, about what's proposed being visually harmful to the character and appearance of this area in the countryside. I mean, when we visited the site, I mean, for it to be visually harmful, it has to be seen by somebody, obviously, by definition. As far as I could see, I mean, I don't know, I might be wrong, but the nearest dwelling appeared to be about 2 miles away. I'm not quite sure about that. As I understand it, I mean, there is a public footpath, but again, at a much lower level, so anybody walking on that would be looking up, and I think as Councillor Osterton has made the point, probably would see probably just the roof line of this building. It's difficult for me to just get a grip on this, right? I just wanted some help, really, professionally. I mean, I don't see how it can be harmful when it, quite frankly, is going to subjectively blend in rather well and probably can't be seen except by somebody a mile away. I mean, I don't know where these comments come from and why they're based in this standard form. I just genuinely want to understand rather better than I do, really.
Just the fact that you can't see something from a long distance or immediate distance it's more about the change in the actual character and what you expect to see in this rural location. You know, a cluster of agricultural farm buildings. You've got what was essentially a main fairly modest farmhouse with the evolution of the agricultural buildings that go with it. And whilst you might be replacing a similar floor area, etc., but it's in a much larger building which is a much more grandiose appearance, and it's the actual change in the character which, if repeated all over the countryside, you would fundamentally change the agricultural rural character of what makes the majority of our district special.
Thank you. Just a question about the weight that you give to some of these objections and non-objections. I mean, sometimes we look on the consultation page and we see people who object to things, and yet you're recommending them for approval. Or vice versa. But on this one, if we look on page 24 of 69, there is only the landscape officer. And he says unacceptable impact on the AONB. But the AONB officer doesn't agree. He says no objection, and obviously other experts in landscaping. And I just really need to know the rationale, how we put so much weight on one opinion when there are actually no objections at all from other people who are probably in a position to know as well, or maybe he's more qualified or she's more qualified. I'm just interested to know why this one objection has been picked up on as a reason for refusal.
My understanding is the AONB officer is a town planner. Obviously, our landscape officer specialises in, landscape per se. But at the end of the day, it's also the planning officer's role to balance all of those considerations. In this particular case, was a strong objection from our landscape officer. And also, as officers ourselves, we have a number of years' experience in dealing with applications in sensitive locations in AONBs, and we're also capable of making those kinds of judgments as well as the AONB officer. So that in this particular case, we felt that it was unacceptable in landscape terms.
Yes, Councillor Miller, is there another question to the officers?
No,
or would you like to start a
I'd
debate?
like to start a debate unless anybody's got a...
No, you're very welcome to start the debate.
Yes, I think Councillor Potter said it very well. This actually sits quite well into the planned location. I took the trouble, as a few of us did, to walk down to where this camera is taking this picture from. And if you look out into the wider countryside, it's beautiful, and there's nothing there. And these pathways that were pointed out by the applicant, because I asked some of the questions, a couple of other reasons, you know, they're so far away that, yes, you would only see the top of the building. Because it's, again, you have to appreciate, on a site visit, the lay of the land. Two-dimensional photographs don't hack it, and certainly not on two-dimensional drawings. To keep it short, Chair, I'd like to move this application for approval.
Okay. Councillor Potter was there first, I think. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour of approval? Against?
And my reasons, Chair, is that it will not harm the landscape. In fact, it will enhance the landscape, bearing in mind what has been already described as an out-of-date building which is going to come down, and the whole site itself, with the addition of these 6 terrace houses, will enhance what is there currently. You know, it's been properly planned, and it fits in extremely well. Work that into a condition. It's again that it will not harm the surrounding landscape, and I think it will enhance it. I think we'd like to see that into the reasons for approval.
And is not overdevelopment of the site and replaces existing dwellings?
Yeah.
Or similar words? I'm sympathetic to the officer's comments about the nature of what is developed in the landscape in terms of the rurality and what we expect to see farmsteads. But the only comment I'd make in balance of that is we also expect to see country houses. I mean, in my neck of the woods, the country houses are perhaps the most dominant part of the immediate local landscape. There are farms and farmland, but you don't actually see the farm buildings. The buildings you see are the substantial country houses. And we would be very upset if anybody came along and knocked them down and tried to turn them into old-fashioned farmhouses, because they themselves are part of the beauty of the landscape. So it's a very difficult balancing act, this, and I think we should be careful not to challenge the officers except by disagreeing with them, which we are fully entitled to do. It's what we're here for, to agree or to disagree on these subjective matters. But the officers are certainly confirmed in their view that in some cases the nature of what is in a place is part of that place and is worth protecting and preserving. I had a quick look at this because I wasn't able to be here on Friday, and it seems to me it's an improvement of what is on the site. If you take it that way, the landscape argument is divisive because the AONB officer has taken a completely different view, and therefore I think we are taking the view that the AONB officer's view is the one to take. Anything else? Oh, conditions, of course, yes.
Okay, just a few conditions to suggest. Plans, the time limit, materials, a number of conditions relating to respecting the relationships with the existing residential on there. So it's about no additional window openings in various elevations. A scheme of landscaping, including boundary treatments, again, given the sensitive setting of the site. Provision of appropriate level of car parking, given there are 6 units here. The demolition of the existing dwelling prior to the occupation, so that you won't end up with two. The contaminated land condition suggested by environmental health as per the previous one, given its use as a farm, tree protection plan, and removal of permitted development rights, similar reasons as before, but also the terracing is quite tight. So in order to control what may or may not happen there in terms of respecting the relationships between those new properties and existing. Thank you, Chair. This is a proposal for the change of use from a residential dwelling to a residential care home, with various small alterations, including a new window to the west elevation of the main building, an extension to and conversion of the existing garage workshop to form a two-bedroom annex for use in connection with the care home. Members again visited the site, noting a relationship with adjoining properties. Draw your attention to the update sheet. Just one further contribution required with regard to the Section 106 agreement in respect of allotment provision. The applicant is aware of this requirement and happy for that to be included within the agreement. The recommendation is for approval, subject to the completion of that agreement and the number of conditions listed in the main report.
Evening, and if you press your big white black button, you have 4 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Bridgman, and I'm Director of Referrals for Choice Care Group. I've worked for the company for 19 years and have stayed that length of time, as I'm so proud of the extremely high care standards of care and support and accommodation we provide to our service users. We support adults who have a learning disability. Some of these people will have a diagnosis, perhaps autism, Down syndrome, Fragile X, etc., but others will not have a formal label as such. I'm sure most of you here will know of, or may even be a carer of someone with a learning disability, as unfortunately the number of people with a learning disability is on the increase. The people we care for usually move to us when they leave school or when the parents can no longer continue to care for them at home. Or they might move back to the area if they've been living out of the area for a long time, so that they can be closer to family. It's our aim to provide them with a home from home, local services for local people, excuse me, so that people don't have to be sent to services or larger institutions that are miles away from the people that are important to them. Red Roof will be based on a model that works successfully amongst our other 47 residential care homes. With a maximum of 8 beds proposed, it's an ideal size to create a domestic, family-style living accommodation. Once people move in, they tend to stay for many years. Before purchasing a new property, we would have carried out a great deal of research, to find out whether there is a need for a new care home in the area. This information is collated by speaking with local authority commissioning teams and parents. To quote the Hampshire commissioners, we have a lot of people coming up through children's services who will need a safe and suitable home to live in. Evidence has therefore shown us that Hampshire has a high demand for a care home to be developed in this area, so as to allow people the right to live and integrate within their local community, close to family and friends. The people we will be proposing to support at Red Roof are, as I say, individuals with a learning disability, people who cannot live alone as they need support with personal care, keeping themselves safe and to lead a healthy and fulfilling lifestyle. Our aim will be to support them to get out and about, enjoy many of the activities that many of us do: swimming, cinema, lunch, walk, cycling clubs. It's also our aim to support them in their ongoing education and personal development. The group of people we will be supporting should not be confused with other service user groups, and they will not be drug and alcohol users or people with a forensic history. We take our responsibility of being good neighbours very seriously and are mindful and respectful of any potential noise and parking issues that may cause our neighbours a problem. We very much want to integrate into our local communities. Our door is always open, so to speak, if anybody has an issue they want to discuss with us. Indeed, the people we support often love to have visitors, and a warm welcome is usually received. There have never been any complaints regarding our existing care home, which is next door to Red Roof, called Fairview. In our existing homes, whilst there were of course questions raised as to the impact of a care home and what it may have within the local neighbourhood at the
You have
point
just under a minute.
at the point of submitting our planning application, we have in fact gone on to foster very positive relationships with our neighbours. Many are regular visitors, and indeed with staff on shift 24 hours a day, we've often been called on to feed the cat, walk the dog, or provide additional 24-hour neighbourhood watch. And one of our neighbours actually joins us every year for their Christmas dinner. So I hope that this has given you a clearer picture of how we would like to develop Red Roofs, that is to say, into a family-style home for people with disabilities who, for one reason or another, cannot live with their own families. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members have any questions for the speaker? David?
Hello. In defence, I have to say I don't think I knew there was a care home there until this planning application came up. However, the local community is quite upset about parking, and when you have a changeover of staff, you obviously have, I don't suppose all the staff leave at the same time, but you know, if you have 4 staff, that's probably 8 cars. Not necessary, because some could live locally. Is there any way that more parking, or you could do something to stop upsetting the balance of the local people in respect of parking and changeover and using the road, because the road isn't actually a road suitable for parking. Although highways would say that often it quietens the road down because there's cars there, but it is barely passable at times with cars. So my real question is, if you do get planning permission, for goodness sake, just watch the parking issues. So my question to you is, please be aware of that.
That was more of an admonition. Would you like to comment in response to that admonition?
Absolutely, definitely. And we've done so in other homes when there's, you know, as I say, we're very respectful of our neighbours, recognise that we need to be adaptable and open to suggestions. So I hear what you're saying.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. That's it. Ward Councillor? No, if you'd like to withdraw, thank you. Ward Councillor?
Yeah, thank you very much. Once again, I'm reading as it is written, and it's from Councillor Mike Bound. Okay, ready? Here we go. Once again, my apologies for not being present to speak on this matter. This application is for a change of use from a dwelling C3 to a residential care home C2 for 8 adults with learning whatever, and mental health disorders. I can't even say it. I've got a mental disability. I've said it now. The accompanying officer report indicates a local need for such a facility, and I'm very much in favour of accommodating that need should it exist, and very importantly, should it be local. Right. I requested the site visit because I felt it would be important for the committee to view the property in relation to its surroundings, its proximity to OB Gardens, to One Oak, and to One Oak, whatever that is, to the already operational facility at Fairview. The parking arrangements and a public footpath that run alongside the property of Red Roof. Anecdotally, OB Gardens experiences problems at times, and also anecdotally, I am told that the footpath alongside Red Roof generates a certain amount of antisocial behaviour. However, I am uncertain as to how much of a problem, if any, this would be for the care home at Red Roof. Likewise, the fact that there is already a care home facility further along the road at Fairview has been cited as a local concern. Again, I am uncertain as to whether this will be so. I have not heard any adverse comments about this facility during the time that I've been a ward councillor. That there would be 2 such homes close together might be said to be an overabundance of such a facility in such a small area, and it might be said to be changed the characteristic of the area, and they won't greatly intrude greatly. I'm only reading what he's written. It's not the way I would write it. Anyway, if at all, on the neighbourhood in terms of the street scene. The alterations proposed to Red Roof would greatly change its appearance. Both Fairview and Red Roof would still be very much like private residences on a street of private residences. Therefore, on balance, I don't see any problem with the fact that they are two close together. Right. As a ward councillor, I am somewhat concerned about the parking arrangements associated with the proposal and the bin storage. I believe that parking was a concern with the previous withdrawn proposal, and I would like the committee to be reassured that the new proposal fully overcomes any concern that they might feel. Otherwise, the report mentions bin storage again, and I would like to feel the problems main known in the report have been overcome. Thank you for listening. Michael Bound, councillor, not me, as it is written. Oh yeah. So,
Questions to officers? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to this parking issue, again, when we went on site, it comes back to the observations made by Councillor Leeks. It's the changeover. And we heard from, I believe it was the agent or it was somebody from the company was showing us around. But some people walk here, but other people might come from a further distance. That's all trying to make an argument for why there are only 5 spaces. I noticed in the report the parking standards for residential care home are. By the way, what's an FTE? Full-time employee. Okay, fine. Plus 1 space per 4 clients. I don't believe any of the clients in this case will drive a car. Well, no, it says here plus 4 clients. I assume those are residents. Are they? That's the question to the officers.
Yes, with respect to the car parking standards, the standards are split into 2 components, one being for the staff, which is 1 space per 2 staff, which in this case I understand we're looking at about 5 during the working day, so it gives you the 2.5 spaces. And then there's a visitor component, which is 1 space per 4 clients, giving from 8 further 2 spaces, giving 4.5, rounded up to 5 spaces.
That's at any one time. What about staff changeover? That was the question we put on site. It really didn't get answered, and I put it to you, having had experience on a much bigger scale of shifts, 24-hour shifts and changeovers, the parking was never right. There wasn't enough cars for people to park and actually do the exchange.
I mean, the parking standard is the parking standard, so it doesn't, it is calculated on that basis, so by providing 5 spaces they are strictly complying with the parking standards.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think the issue is really that parking standards pick up on what the general requirements are. I appreciate there might be with staff changeover a particular peak at a particular time, but I don't think it would be appropriate in terms of the current planning policies and the way the current parking standards work to effectively design for the limited period where there's the staff changeover. I appreciate that might mean that there could be some overspill onto the public highway at a specific period of time, but I don't think it'd be appropriate for the parking standards to work in a way that would accommodate, however many additional parking spaces for that particular period of time.
The reason why the subject is brought up, Chairman, is because that road is not sufficient to allow for extra parking on the road. We saw that minivan, we went, the minibus that go around on the viewing panel, you can't get 2 of those in the road. They can't pass. They have to go on the pavement, on the sidewalk. That's the reason that the parking thing came up, because there's insufficient road width there. It's servicing another development further down the road. And all we kept hearing about, we've heard it this evening from the ward councillors, is that that road is insufficient for extra parking. And that's where some of these concerns coming up, which is why I asked the question again about the parking standards. But it doesn't address the changeover. I understand the calculations, that's pure mathematics, that's not a problem. But then you've got to operate it. This is a 24-hour operation, it's not a house. It is now a business that operates in a certain way. It has to because of the nature of the business.
The applicant's representative is desperate to speak to us, but we haven't asked the question. We don't really allow that, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. I think the issue which is being raised here, which is general, we'll come back to the application in a second, but the general issue is that the parking standards are the parking standards, as you say, but our approach to parking requirements on a site should also take into account the local situation. So that if a site is on a big wide road with residents parking and visitors parking spaces all over the place, the parking standards may over-provide in some cases. If it's on a narrow road where two cars can't easily pass each other, then the parking standards on the site may under-provide. And that's a general point that I think is being made. And it's being exasperated, it's being made on this case because the parking standards don't appear to make provision for staff changeover times, although they do allow for visitors. So I think if that general point can be noted, please, officers, outside of the context of this application, we'll come back to the application. Because members will determine whether to approve or refuse the application, but they're trying to make the point that our approach to what parking is required in a particular situation should not entirely depend on the arithmetic of the parking standards. There are other factors at play. Is that right, members? Yes. Any more questions to the officers? David? And
I mean, I don't really
Marilyn, was that a question to the officers? Not really. David, then, please.
I mean, in that regard, I don't know whether this evidence has been provided, but my presumption would be, and Councillor Miller is exactly right in terms of the sort of changeover process. I understand the doubling up there, but my presumption would be that that would be for a relatively short period of time, wouldn't it? It's handing over the notes from one care person to another saying how the people that are caring for have fared in that particular period of operation. My best guess is we're talking about 10 minutes, something of that order really, and that's when that doubling up would occur. It seems to me that isn't impossible to manage, and then obviously the cars that are for the people that are then going to take over the next shift are clearly parked on the property itself. I would have thought that was manageable. Is that an assumption that's been made by officers?
Sorry. Yes, obviously, one of the balancing acts was that, you know, whether this potential parking issue at the, as you say, relatively minimal amount of time is so severe as to justify refusal of the scheme as a whole. And on balance, officers felt that no, it wouldn't be something which we felt we could justifiably refuse this scheme on.
I think the point's been well made. I also, if I've not misread the report, my understanding is that the overnight shift is smaller in numbers. I'm getting a nod from the back. So there isn't a 100% turnover like a 24-hour shift factory. It's some leave, and a couple of other people come and take over if they're not already there. I think we shall move on from that point. If anybody's got other questions to the officers. David, yes? Right, Marilyn? Debate. No? Right, fine, we'll start with Marilyn then. She was first, I think. Then David.
Excuse me. It is actually on the same subject of parking. We have in the past had applications where there have been problems with numbers of care workers. One particular one in Sherfield on Loddon. But once the owners, occupiers, were made aware of the problems that it was causing local people, there have been a major change, and there are not the problems that there used to be. It is a matter of, a lot of it is just the organisation of the care home operators, and it's quite obvious that it's been taken on board, that people are concerned, and I'm sure they'll do everything, if it's granted, to be kind and considerate.
Chairman, all I've said, I mean, but I'm going to propose the recommendation. Even though I disagree with the parking, I think the advantages of the facility outweighs the disadvantages, and I'm going to propose what the officers recommend approval. Thank you.
Officers confirm.
Resolution to approve, subject to the completion of the legal agreement with the additional contribution referred to in the update paper, and then subject to the conditions set out in the main report.
I would like separately to take up at some point the question that was raised about the relationship between parking standards per se and the parking situation in a location of a particular site. Because we often hear that it meets the standards, therefore we can't say anything else. That doesn't seem right to me in principle, and maybe we should be looking at that separately and think about how, just really think through whether that is actually the case or not.
Chairman, and I'd like to wish them well in their success of their...
The members would like to wish you well in arranging brilliant parking arrangements. Right, we'll move on to number 6. No, sorry, number 5. I'm doing my best. This is Ball Hill, new in Wootton Hill, East Woody rather. Mustn't confuse the two. We have to speak for the parish council, Mrs. Cooper, if you'd like to come forward. No? No. Right. In that case, we have objecting to it, Mr. Johnson. And if you'd like to just sit there for a moment, we'll get the officers to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for the erection of a replacement dwelling and attached garage and store following the demolition of the existing bungalow and relocation of existing access. The application is a resubmission following a previously refused scheme by members at the May Committee. The amendments to this scheme have been summarised within the main agenda paper. With regards to the update paper, 3 additional letters of objection have been received, which with the same sort of themes as previous. In addition, following the update, a further objection was also received. Again, this raised similar concerns. It raised one additional concern with regards to the potential, if members were minded to approve the application, that some sort of condition be put on to reduce the ground level and sink the proposal into the ground, as it were. But obviously, the proposed scheme at the moment has been assessed adequately and obviously has been recommended for approval, subject to the conditions at the end of the paper. Thank you.
What I'm hearing there, just to make sure we understand where we are, is that the proposal that members should ask that the development be deeper into the ground is not open to the committee to deal with. We're dealing with the planning application as it stands. Thank you. So you have 4 minutes.
Good evening. I am the resident of Knights Lane representing the objectors, and I am a chartered architect. The changes made to the dwelling and garage are insignificant, which does not overcome the reasons for refusal. By virtue of its size and bulk, it would still be over-prominent in its setting and overbearing on the street scene and on Ambleside. With this new application, our primary objection is to the amended detached garage. The applicant and the officer's report fails to recognise that to comply with the planning policy and guidance cited in the reasons for refusal, the garage should not extend forward of the dwelling building line. This is necessary to address the overly prominent and overbearing issue with the garage. I shall now expand on this. Siting the garage in the front garden and projecting well forward of the dwelling does not respect the local context and character with regard to policies D6, E1, Appendix 13 and the village design statement. Appendix 13 specifically states that a garage should not project further forward of a strong building line. There is clearly a strong existing building line which the officer report recognises by saying there is, and I quote, an established building line which maintains an open streetscape. The siting of the proposed garage is completely at odds with this. All 19 garages in this part of Knights Lane do not extend beyond their respective dwelling building lines, including the new Little Garston and the existing garage to Merrifield. The proposed garage would break this consistent, distinctive and attractive characteristic along both sides of the lane that notably continues well on down the lane beyond the property. The officer's text describing the garage, and I quote, rural appearance and at the end of the street scene, is therefore irrelevant and incorrect. The garage would be clearly seen projecting forward and looming above the front of Ambleside on the approach up the lane. The garage will be even more apparent from the lane and neighbouring properties with the possible cutting back or removal of the conifer hedge trees and undergrowth to reinstate the more open frontage to the lane, as other properties have done, which is reasonable and which cannot be realistically prevented by planning condition. Screening cannot therefore be used as any form of justification. Village Design Statement point 57 states, garages should be located to minimise visual intrusion, and point 108 states that so far as is practical, garages should be set back behind the building line. It is practical in this case. The relatively extensive area of ground floor family living and dining accommodation proposed indicates that it would be perfectly feasible to incorporate a reasonable garage within this area and behind the building line without fundamentally changing the design of the dwelling or the ability to achieve a practical 4-bedroom family dwelling proportionate to this plot. This was required in the recent rebuild of the adjacent Little Garston. This could also then realistically address the overbearing impact of the garage on Ambleside and avoid closing down the open separation between the dwellings. Otherwise, a garage should be omitted, as for the other new dwellings in the lane, Tintagel and the recently approved the Paddocks. I conclude by saying that we've explained that the profoundly unsatisfactory and harmful nature of this significant part of the development,
You have about 40 seconds.
backed up by policy and for which the application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. You never tell when somebody's going to finish. Any questions for Mr. Johnson? No, thank you very much. Then I have Mr. McCallum. You have 4 minutes, sir.
Good evening. I am the applicant and architect. This application seeks to address the concerns of the Planning Committee, board members and residents. I have listened to the comments made and the cumulative changes now presented, which are significant. The committee report lists the numerous changes which include removing the more radical and prominent elements of the previous design. The size has also been reduced in length and height, particularly the garage. The character of the proposal now reflects the chalet-style dwellings along the lane, and it will sit very discreetly in the lane. The garage is now 2/3 the size it was before, is set back more than 10 metres from the road. It is well concealed by a dense screen of holly and other coniferous and deciduous trees, which are to remain and have been protected by a report concluded with the application. This is actually farther back than most of the other dwellings in Knights Lane. The garage is also set down 1 metre below the existing ground floor level of Merrifield. It has been moved to be 3 metres away from the boundary of Ambleside, and the back gutter is lower than the fence line. The changes to the design mean that Ambleside will, in reality, get more sunlight and daylight than it does at present from the gable end of the bungalow. Its amenities are actually improved. There is no unreasonable overlooking of Ambleside, The first floor bedroom windows always overlook neighbours and gardens to some degree. In this case, the distance and the oblique angle is more than reasonable. I appreciate the concerns of my neighbours, but they really are unfounded. The size of the proposal is similar to neighbouring development and of significantly less visual impact. The existing access to Merrifield is unsafe, and the new access will be a significant improvement. There are other garages and buildings in Knights Lane that are closer to the road than this proposal and far more prominent. The proposal is in compliance with planning policy and the village design statement, as the officer's report concludes. The parish council are happy with the revised scheme. I would therefore ask the committee to accept the officer's recommendation and approve this proposal. I see from the amendment report there are further objections to the garage, and as we just heard, I would just like to reiterate, its gutter is no higher than the garden fence. It is 3 metres from the boundary with Ambleside. It is 10 metres from the boundary to the road, which is a further distance than many of the buildings in Knights Lane. It is well screened by the existing deciduous and coniferous hedging and trees which are retained and not taken out. It does not overshadow Ambleside, and is further back and far more discreet than the garden building which has been approved for Tintagel opposite, which is of a similar size and a greater height. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If you just press your big black button for me. Any questions to the applicant? No, thank you very much, sir. If you'd like to withdraw. Ward member? You have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. When this previous application for this site came to you a couple of months ago, I spoke against it on the grounds that I think basically that the design was, though a very actually quite striking and interesting design, was the wrong design in the wrong place and was inappropriate for that particular road. The revised design is less striking. It is more normal, if you want to call it that, but not uninteresting in its own way. I think the removal of some of the more outstanding elements of the earlier design now mean that the revised version, as well as being smaller and taking into account some of the other reasons for massing and for the size and scope of that building, now make it much more acceptable than it was previously. I've been to have a look at it again yesterday and today, just to remind myself of the particular site, and it is very difficult to see how you would actually even see the building in many cases when you walk or drive down the road, because it is so well screened. I think the argument about the garage, the village design statement doesn't say you cannot have a garage in front of the building line. It just says it would be ideal if you didn't have a garage in front of the building line. In fact, I think you'd be hard pressed to see the garage at all from the road from either side, because you have screening on both sides of it, both from the Ambleside view and from the roadside view. So on the grounds that now I think that the building is much more in line, particularly with the permission that was granted to the paddocks, which is next door but one, only I think 4 months ago by this committee. It would be invidious to have granted that permission and then to turn this one down, having accommodated or had accommodated some of the more outstanding reasons for not having it in place. So I would support the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions for the ward member? Thank you very much. Questions to the officers? Paul?
Technical one. What's the policy architecturally or anything else about this business about building lines? Is it up to village design statements? Does the LPA have a stance on this?
There's no planning policy in the local plan which says anything specific about building lines. There's obviously the general policy E1 about keeping with the sort of character and context of the area. There are then village design statements to obviously articulate particular issues, if you like, around for a particular location. But in this instance, as Councillor Sanders has pointed out, there isn't anything specific which says you cannot have. I think the key issue here is, particularly given the plot's location on that corner plot, and I don't know if we can have a location plan up to show this, it's that consideration of the particular case. And in this instance, because the garage is located on that corner part, if you like, where the road sweeps round, it's considered appropriate. It may be different if it was further out on a plot where the building line of the houses continued. But there's no black and white explanation, if you like, as to when it will or will not be acceptable. But in this instance, for the reasons set out in the report, officers felt that it is.
Any discussion? Councillor Potter.
Well, I think briefly, Chairman, I mean, we sometimes get applicants who go away and quite frankly don't really respond to the commentary of this committee or others really in regard to the changes they make. This isn't such a case. I mean, there are substantial changes that have been made, there are improvements that have been made. I mean, if Councillor Sanders likes it, I mean, his taste in design is impeccable like mine, so obviously I'm bound to support it, I think, in its revised form, Chairman.
And remind members that Councillor Sanders is a St John's man, and therefore I cannot possibly agree with him about anything. Any other comments? Was that a move to approve the recommendation, David? It was. Would somebody second that, Paul? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour of approval? That's carried, officers.
The application has been approved subject to the conditions in the main report.
We move to item 6. Item 6 only comes to the committee because the applicant is a council member. There appear to be no significant objections to it and no speakers, and on that basis I propose, unless anybody wants to have a debate about it, to move for approval from the chair. Thank you, Councillor Leeks. Those in favour? That's approved. Officers, complete term, please.
The application is approved subject to the conditions in the main agenda. Thank you.
Members, you'll be very pleased to know that I have no special discussions to have with you this evening, and Mike has promised that if there are any further exciting reports that we need to debate, he's going to do it on an occasion when I'm on holiday. I knew you'd all approve of that. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is just before, I was accurate, it's just before 8:15.